Edmonds Community College. I am Dan Guerrero. I'm the Director of Safety, Security, and Emergency Preparedness here at the college. We are happy to be hosting this community forum. Opioid abuse is a national crisis. I read recently that every single day in our country there are 589 additional heroin users in the population, and it's going up. And for the first time in our history, entire population groups are seeing a rise in their death rates rather than a decrease, and that's almost entirely due to drug usage. So this is a community problem as well as a national problem, of course. I would like to introduce two community leaders who play a leading role in addressing this crisis, and I do consider it a crisis. The new Chief of Police for Linwood Police Department, Tom Davis, and Al Capone, the Chief of Police for the Edmonds Police Department, two of our most vital partners in this great struggle. Al?
Well, good evening. Thank you all for coming out tonight. This is a problem that impacts all of our communities. Obviously, that's why you're here, because you have an interest in this. Perhaps you have a family member that's been personally impacted, or a good friend, or perhaps you're just interested in what the impacts are in our community. My officers are out there every day dealing with the fallout from opiate addiction, whether it's people that are suffering medical issues, whether it's property crimes such as house burglaries, commercial burglaries, vehicle theft, vehicle prowl, robberies. These are all things that we deal with, and we're dealing with it at an unprecedented rate. You're going to hear some things tonight, I think, that will probably surprise you, even if you're pretty well versed with what's going on out there. So I'm going to let the panel continue here in just a minute. We have a fabulous group of panel members tonight to interact with you and to present the material. So thank you again for coming tonight, and I'd like to introduce Tom Davis, who's chief next door to Edmonds. We work together all the time. Tom?
Thank you, Al. I want to just echo Dan's words and Al's words, and probably not going to say anything to you up here that you don't already know. Some things that I will say, my observations, are that drug addiction, and opiate addiction in particular, is not biased. It doesn't care what race you are, doesn't care what ethnicity you are, what gender you are, what religion you are, what your socioeconomic status is, and it makes it a community problem. It's not a health problem, a police problem, a personal problem, an individual problem. It is a community problem. And in Linwood and in Edmonds and our other partner jurisdictions, it's an important issue for us. We're looking in Linwood to develop a community health and safety unit that specifically addresses this. We'll meet Sergeant Cole Langdon in just a second. He's spearheading that initiative. It's important for us. It's important for our city leaders to help deal with this issue in a holistic community way. We're also going through some training right now. All of our officers in Linwood are being trained with for the use of naloxone to carry that. And if you read in the Herald today, the timeliness of this, they're getting a thumbs up in the back, the timeliness of this was incredible. We haven't even finished the training yet. This shows you the need. We have not even finished the training with the officers yet. The officers have not even yet been issued the naloxone because we haven't completed the training. Yet one of the officers that was trained just last week heard an 8 call over the police radio, and it was at a pharmacy here in Linwood. And he responded, recognized what was occurring, the overdose, based on his training from just last week. And literally, in the pharmacy is where this happened, if you can believe this, literally asked the pharmacist if they had naloxone available, grabbed it, and actually administered the dose and saved the young man's life. That's the role that law enforcement has to play. It's the role that parents have to play. It's the role the community has to play. So thank you for your interest. Thank you for being here tonight. And we appreciate your attention and your seriousness as we approach this issue. Thank you.
I think I'm up next. Thank you, folks, for coming out tonight. This is the fourth community meeting that we've had here in Snohomish County dealing with this epidemic on heroin and opioids. My name is Strom Peterson. I'm a state representative representing the 21st District. Oh, that reminds me, we should all turn off our cell phones. See, there was like a cue. So if you could, please put your cell phones on vibrate, buzz, whatever it is. But as I was saying, my name is Strom Peterson, and I represent the 21st District, which is Edmonds and Mukilteo and parts of South Everett, unincorporated county. And this is just fantastic to see so many people out on such a kind of gloomy, gruesome night. I would like to recognize a few people here, some elected officials. My good friend and former City Council mate, who's now on the Edmonds City Council and also serves on the Snohomish County Public Health Board, Adrian Freeland-Anias is here. Linwood City Council member George Hurst is, there he is, thank you so much. Edmonds School Board member Karen Chase is here. And I also see staff from County Council member Stephanie Wright's office is here as well. And I know that the County Council, all of them have been very interested in this issue and have really been doing some fantastic work, which I think you'll hear about on the panel tonight. As you can see from the program, our agenda tonight includes a presentation from Dr. Gary Goldbaum with the Snohomish Health District and Cleo Harris with Snohomish County Human Services. Following these presentations, we'll have Commander Stephen Ryder of the Linwood Police Department. We'll speak about the impacts of opioid addiction in the community. And then joining Commander Ryder from Linwood Police is Sergeant Cole Langdon, and he'll be available during some of the Q&A at the end of the presentations. I would also like to point out Mark Richardson from the Regional Drug and Gang Task Force here in Snohomish County. Like I kind of stated before with the County Council, this Drug and Gang Task Force is really on, I think, the leading edge nationally on how to be proactive in dealing with this issue. So we're fortunate to have that kind of leadership in the county. And last but certainly not least, we're fortunate to have Debbie Warfield and Lindsay Grenke here with us tonight to share their personal stories. And as I've been working on this issue, and it'll be a go off script here just a moment, you find that everybody has a personal story. That's what brought me to this issue. I had a young cousin die a few years ago. His mom in Indiana is doing much what these two ladies are doing, incredible work around access to naloxone. So I'll make sure that we exchange some emails, because this is tearing families apart, as I think everybody knows. So I'll get a little choked up, and I think by the end of this night, I think we all will be. But I think as we listen to these experts and we have a conversation as a community, I think we'll, as devastating as this is, I think we'll leave this room with some hope. I think some energy to really start making a difference. We ask, like I said, we'll have a Q&A session at the end, so I ask that you save those questions. But we'll go around at the end with the microphone, so just remember what those are, and we'll try to get to everybody as much as we can. And finally tonight, it's, as I said, it's about sharing information and about this issue in our community. It's not about blame, it's not about pointing fingers, but I think as you hear from our panelists, and as you've heard from law enforcement, they get that. Obviously, this is very sensitive, this is very personal. So as we proceed, be respectful of everybody's thoughts and considerations and comments. But this is a fantastic group of panelists that we've got together. I'm very much looking forward to the conversation tonight. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Goldbaum.
Well, again, thank you all for coming out tonight. This is a really important issue, it's important to me. I'm trained as a family doctor, and I've delivered babies, and I've been at the bedside as people were dying. But this epidemic has really it's made me look very differently at some of the work that I'm doing in the community. As the director of the Snohomish Health District, that's your local public health agency, I think of myself as the doctor not just to a few thousand people, but to 750,000 residents of the county. And I'm responsible for assuring that all of you have access to the best information possible about how to make decisions about your health. So tonight I'm hoping that between what I'll say and what my fellow panelists will say, you'll leave here with a really deep appreciation for how challenging this problem really is. First thing I want to do is just make sure we all understand what we're talking about. So, opioids, that's what this form's about. They include things like morphine, oxycodone, that's Oxycontin is the brand name, hydrocodone, fentanyl, codeine, opium, heroin. Some are legal drugs, prescribed as medicinals, others illegal drugs. They all act in basically the same way. They reduce physical and emotional pain, they increase pleasure. And if you take them long enough, there are physiologic changes in the brain leading to dependence, and actually in other parts of the body as well, such that if you stop using the drug, you will feel pain, you'll start to vomit, diarrhea, insomnia, restlessness, all these characteristics of withdrawal. If you take enough of it, you overdose. Even if your body is pretty tolerant, you can reach the point where your body can't tolerate it. And at that point, if any of you saw this in the community, you'd recognize it pretty easily. The pupils become just pinpoint. If you looked in their eyes, you'd almost see nothing there, and their breathing stops. And that's what actually kills somebody. They literally suffocate because they are no longer breathing. I want to read you a passage from a book, Dreamland by Sam Quinones. He's a reporter who explored the whole opioid epidemic, and he interviewed a lot of people about it. So here he was interviewing Dr. Andy Coop, who chaired the Department of Pharmaceutical Sciences at the University of Maryland in Baltimore. And this is what Dr. Coop said. What gave the morphine molecule its immense power was that it evolved somehow to fit, key and lock, into the receptors that all mammals, especially humans, have in their brains and spines. The so-called mu-opioid receptors, designed to create pleasure sensations when they receive endorphins the body naturally produces, were especially welcoming to the morphine molecule. The receptor combines with endorphins to give us those glowing feelings at say, the sight of an infant or the feel of a furry puppy. The morphine molecule overwhelms the receptor, however, creating a far more intense euphoria than anything would come by internally. It also produces drowsiness, constipation, and an end to physical pain. Aspirin had a limit to the amount of pain it could calm, but the more morphine you took, the more pain was dulled. Tobacco, coca leaves, and other plants had evolved to be pleasurable and addictive to humans, Dr. Coop said, but the morphine molecule surpassed them in euphoric intensity. Then it exacted a mighty vengeance. When a human dared to stop using it, in withdrawal from the drug, an addict left narcotized numbness and returned to life and to feeling. Humans with the temerity to attempt to withdraw from the morphine molecule were tormented, first with excruciating pain that lasted for days. We're talking about addiction ultimately, but that's only a point in the entire process that these opioids lead us through. So the first thing is that a person has access to the drugs. Now it can happen, for many of us it happened for the first time when we went to the dentist's office and had an extraction and got a prescription for Percodan or Oxycontin or something like that. Or maybe it was as a student, you know, a 10th grader who went to a party and there were a bunch of pills there. Or maybe it was just being introduced to it in college by one of our friends who said, hey, take this, it's really great. However you got access to it. You either hated the feeling, and there are lots of us who've taken these drugs and said, I will never take that again. I don't care how much pain, because it's just awful. I don't like the haze. But there are others who like it. And if they like it enough, they take it again and again, until at some point the brain, those receptors that I just read about, those receptors now expect to have more of it. Now at that point, you have become physiologically dependent. There have been actual chemical changes in the brain, and if you try to stop, you go through withdrawal. But dependence isn't the end point. People who are dependent, who would withdraw if they stopped, can still stop. It takes effort, but they aren't at a place where the drug is consuming them. That's the next step of addiction. Now, the point of addiction, a person so craves the drug, so needs the drug, in the drive to avoid withdrawal, to dull the pain of life, that they will do anything, sacrifice anything to get more of the drug. Now that's addiction. People who are truly addicted are willing to forfeit everything. Job, family, school, friends, everything for that next dose. That's addiction. And of course, addiction, meaning that you will take it, you will crave it, you will take it, and you will take it again, and you won't even care what you are taking, and you can overdose. And we're in a place right now where those of us in public health would say, this is truly an epidemic. So what you see here, first let me draw your attention to the green line. Those are opioid deaths. So it's all opioids, prescription drugs, the illegal drugs, predominantly heroin. And what you can see is those deaths were increasing from 2000 until about 2008, and now it's been kind of level. But look at the number. It's about 700 a year in Washington State, almost 2 a day. 2 people a day in Washington State alone dying of an opioid overdose. Now what you see in those bars below, that separates out heroin from the other opioids, especially the prescription opioids. So those brown bars are the prescription opioids. And you can see that was going up until 2008 and then started to decrease. And heroin was kind of level really until about 2009. And then it starts increasing. If I showed you 2015, we don't have the final numbers on this yet, but heroin overdoses are now exceeding the prescription drug overdoses. But they're still pretty close. You might ask, what happened that we saw this change in this pattern? Well, this really started about 2 decades ago when the pharmaceutical industry began really promoting the use of prescription opioids. And the medical community wanting to do the right thing to treat pain, because that is, after all, what doctors really ought to do, is to properly treat pain. So the opioids were being prescribed more and more in the community. The result was that there was this overwhelming supply of these drugs, and there were a lot of people who were now using these drugs, and a lot of people who were becoming dependent on these drugs, the prescription drugs. So you had the overdoses starting to occur, to increase the overdoses due to the prescription drugs. But then it was about almost 10 years ago that the medical community realized there are a lot of people overdosing due to these prescription drugs. we're going to need to do something about that. The pharmaceutical industry was compelled to reformulate its drugs so that they weren't as easily abused. In particular, people had been taking drugs that were pills, crushing them up so they could smoke them or even inject them. The drugs were reformulated, you couldn't inject them any longer, and the result was that people had to find substitutes. I'll get to that in just a minute. Here in Snohomish County, just to point out, 1 in 5 of the heroin deaths in Washington were from Snohomish County, 1 in 5. But we represent only 1/10 of the state's population. So we have about twice the rate of the rest of the state. 2 out of the 3 deaths were men, but look at the age. Most of these deaths were among 18 to 29 years old. That's a very different picture than what we saw 50 years ago, when these deaths were predominantly of people who were in their 40s and 50s. So going from the pain pills to heroin, as I mentioned, people started with the prescription drugs. Yes, heroin was always out there, but you saw how those deaths due to heroin were. That was a kind of flat line there. So what was happening is that people were now using the prescription drugs, needing to find a substitute, and they found it. You don't have to remember all the chemistry, but what you need to do is to just look on the right side, your right side of each of these 2 pictures. So there's the chemical structure of oxycodone, OxyContin. Look at the right side of the heroin molecule. They are remarkably similar. And as far as your brain is concerned, they're basically identical. But there's an important difference. Oxycodone on the street costs about $80 a pill. Heroin on the street costs about $80 for a fix. And it's much easier to get. So now we understand why it is that there is truly an opioid epidemic. And it's an epidemic brought on by all of us. Just have to note, the pharmaceutical industry played a role, the medical community played a role, but you know what? All of us in this room, and our friends and family and neighbors, all of us have played a role in this. Thinking that every pain needs to be treated with a pill. That has led us to the place where we ourselves have also demanded the drugs that are now killing us. And unfortunately, it's not just the adult community that is at risk, because frankly, a lot of the people who are addicted today got started as teens. Here's what our youth are telling us. Public Health conducts a survey in the schools, surveys every 2 years of 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th graders. Anonymous surveys, there's no reason for any of the kids to misrepresent. But we ask them questions about a lot of things, including drug use. And that first circle you see, 1 in 4 of sophomores didn't think it was wrong to use illegal drugs. 1 in 4 did not think it was wrong to use illegal drugs. Among 12th graders, 1 in 17 have tried heroin. So in a class of, say, 35, could be 2 of those kids have already tried heroin. Among 8th graders, 1 in 20 reported that they were currently using, at the time of the questions being asked, currently using prescriptions not prescribed to them. So we have created a culture that supports using drugs for recreation or just to dull the pain of life. I mentioned that addiction is the deepest level of dependence. And it is both those brain changes that make you physiologically dependent, but addiction is also those social and psychological problems that drive you to need to use that drug. And it becomes a vicious cycle. Once a person is using the drug, having problems already with it, alienating friends and family, they are diving ever deeper into that pit where they need more of the drug to dull the challenges that they are now creating for themselves. So it becomes a vicious cycle. It is possible to break that cycle. It is not easy. And frankly, it requires more than just simple treatment. It requires an entire culture shift for us to get to this point where we can truly not only treat but prevent addiction. So it's possible to treat the brain changes. There are medicines that can be used to substitute for the opioids. That can help a person avoid the withdrawal, giving them an opportunity potentially to then wean themselves off the opioids entirely, off all the medicines that would otherwise be needed to treat them. That doesn't happen in a vacuum. It also requires counseling and social supports to address those psychological and social issues. So the most important message for me as a doctor is that this is not something that's just easily treated with a pill. It will absolutely require community support for all of the kinds of interventions that we are going to be discussing tonight. Just a few words about medically assisted treatment. You've probably heard about methadone. It's been around for decades. It is an opioid. It can be prescribed to substitute for heroin or OxyContin, for any of those other drugs. It is an opioid, however. It can actually be used to treat pain. It has one advantage. It doesn't cause quite the same level of haze. A person can function while they are taking it. But let me be clear, it is a substitute. It may be necessary for life because remember, these are changes to the brain. So sometimes it's necessary to provide a substitute for quite a long time, maybe forever. Methadone is the most common. It's got the longest history. Newer drugs, buprenorphine and naltrexone, also drugs that are now available in the community, and it's really good that we have more alternatives to offer. But let me remind you, even with these drugs, counseling and other social supports are absolutely critical. And you heard a mention about naloxone. This is what we call an opioid antagonist. It acts against the opioids. It actually